CPA.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody for jumping on board. This is session 3, technically, with Community Futures Entre-Corp, and I'm really excited to be back. Today is onboarding for success, so strategies to engage and retain employees. Today's session is a little bit more, instead of just talking, a little bit more example heavy based on like what things look like and templates, and just kind of giving some business owners and some managers some insight into what documentation kind of looks like, because sometimes you're like, I need an example to feed off of. So I'm just going to start, as I always do, a little bit about myself. So my company, so I have Red Rock HR Limited. I started it in 2023. Basically, my mission is to understand, my clients' unique challenges and provide that basically people approach to HR that I'm looking for, and build that long-term partnership with my clients and in the community. And my purpose is to have that human approach back into HR and get away from that strategic side of HR that everything's going to. So I founded my company back then, and I'm really excited to, part of my values is part of community involvement. And that's why I like working with Community Futures Entre-Corp to give back to the community and hope provide some, practical and real life information and usable information, and just like templates or whatever I can to help the community with areas and around HR. A little bit about myself. I am the founder and an HR consultant as my title with Red Rock HR. I have a wealth of human resources and financial background. So I was in finance for 9 years, went all the way to be a certified financial planner. Switched gears and pivoted to take my HR and labor relations certificate. And then went forward and did my master's in HR through the University of Regina. I've completed lots of different trainings and sessions over the years. One of my favorites is investigations training, as well as I just completed my certified talent management professional designation in February here. So I'm excited about that. So today's session, I just want to make sure that I acknowledge and honor those that came before us. So I'd like to honor and acknowledge that we are situated on Treaty 7 and Treaty 4 territory, traditional lands of the Siksika, Blackfoot, Kainai, Blood, Piikani, Pagan, Stoney Nakoda, and Tsuut'ina Sarsi, as well as the Cree and Sioux and the Saulteaux bands of the Ojibwa peoples. We also honor and acknowledge that we are on the homeland of the Métis Nation within District 2 Battle River Territory. Oh, my overview didn't work. Don't worry. Sorry about that, guys. Today's presentation is going to be on overview is all going to be on onboarding. We're going to go into the 3 elements of onboarding, which is the introduction, orientation, and integration. And I'm going to get into detail on specifically what tools you can use to onboard and what it looks like at different organizations and companies, and maybe some tips and tricks on what works for your organization, and go through there. This session ties in from our last 3 sessions. So we had sessions in January on job description and job advertising. Session 2 was on job description and recruitment and selection, we talked about in February. And then this session is all about onboarding for success. So these all have tied together. And if you look at my little picture to the right here, it has a little gentleman that is fishing, and talent acquisition and finding that talent, or finding those employees and those candidates coming into your organization, is like fishing. But once you find somebody, you reel them in. Onboarding is like bringing them onto your ship or onto your boat. So you'll hear me use some analogies today in regards to onboarding and what that sounds like. And you got my little onboarding picture with my little lady by her boat. So the main point with onboarding, it's a last step in the talent acquisition cycle. And onboarding is all about how we integrate the person into the organization. And it's about mitigating the risk of them. They made a decision, they signed their contract, they're coming onto the ship. We're trying to mitigate the risk of them jumping off the ship. So the whole point of a proper onboarding process is to really all about employee engagement. The process starts right with talent acquisition. It's about the experience and support they receive until they're fully integrated into the organization. People have made their decision to join the organization based on what you've kind of sold them on, what kind of bait you put out there per se. And so we want to make sure that we don't let them go too fast in the onboarding process, because there are opportunities that we haven't integrated them enough that they won't make their stay decision and it hasn't been cemented. So when we look up onboarding, we ask ourselves, what is onboarding? It's basically how we integrate employees into the organization to mitigate early turnover. And what that means is it doesn't matter what size of organization, if you're a very large organization, medium, small, or just just a few employees, it doesn't matter. Onboarding is very important no matter what size your organization is. So think of talent acquisition. Like I said, it was like fishing. Onboarding is keeping them on the boat, engaged into that whole journey when they're sitting on that boat before they go to port and they get off and dock. When a new employee joins your organization, it's like boarding a brand new ship. The ship looks impressive from the outside. It's shiny, it's full of promise, and the journey ahead seems exciting. They're stepping onto a new territory, eager to explore, but also they're uncertain of what's next. And if you don't really make sure they're supported along the way, there can be bumps and there can be risk. I wanted to go through a little bit about why onboarding matters and bring a little bit of statistics back from that. I wanted to walk in the employee's shoes a little bit and learn from the data. So according to Academy of Innovation of HR, 34% of employees have not witnessed any onboarding program at their organization. So contrary to popular belief, many organizations still don't have onboarding process. They sign a contract and kind of get some of the minimum stuff done, like contracts, TD1, TD2, here's your overtime agreement. And then all of a sudden they're kind of like, here's your job, here's your role, here's a policy book. Jane's going to hire you, sit down with you for 2 days and show you your role, and then you're on your own. Other places, it's here's your list of things to do, go for it. Let me know if you have any questions. So it's still out there in organizations that they don't have a full process design. Only 29% of employees say they feel fully prepared for their new role and ready to excel after their onboarding. So this indicates that many organizations fail to achieve 1 to 2 main onboarding goals, which is getting new hires fully operational and ready to succeed in their role. 81% of new hires report feeling overwhelmed with information during the onboarding process. I think a lot of this originates from lots of paperwork, really heavy, lots of reading on the first day. Lots of organizations are using digital tools nowadays to mitigate or automate a lot of their processes now. They actually say that 81% of new hires state that organizations employ at least 6 apps or digital tools, and others 33% use 11 or more to do their onboarding. So when we think of those different tools people are using to onboard, they're using lots of different platforms to get people their contracts, their information, their policies, and everything they need to be successful in their role and before they start. And employees with an exceptional onboarding experience are 2.6 times more likely to be satisfied with work. So the same survey also revealed that only 12% of newly hired employees believe their organization provided a strong onboarding experience. So it's a huge opportunity as employers or managers that as employees, if employees benefit from a comprehensive onboarding process and they're 2.6 times more likely to be satisfied in their jobs and stay, we should put the time and effort into it. And lastly, 89% of employees report being engaged at work following an effective onboarding experience. So according to the survey, that one's compiled by Bamboo HR, the 89% of employees reported that effective onboarding process significantly boosted their engagement at work. Additionally, these employees are 30 times more likely to experience job satisfaction compared to those who found their onboarding process inadequate. So I'd like everybody to know it's just not paperwork and an orientation. It's about engaging and long-term success that begins before they even start and walk in the door. It's a work of an HR team, or if you don't have a team and you're just doing the hiring, it's making sure that you've pieced together all the pieces that you need that you would have from a team to make a successful onboarding process. So when we look at the onboarding value chain and you're starting onboarding somebody, there's introduction, orientation, and integration. So introduction is all your pre-onboarding steps and first day logistics that we're going to go through when you like contracts, sending them a welcome letter. Orientation is all about what you're doing, those very tactical and paperwork based usually tasks, like having them read policies, understanding organizational culture, signing their paperwork, getting their benefits set up. And integration, lastly, is more on the onboarding, support, connection, and training. And so those, we're going to get into more detail about what each one of those are. But that, when we think about onboarding in total, you have introduction, orientation, and integration that makes a full chain of what onboarding is. And the reason onboarding is really important is all about retention. So what is retention? It's ensuring employees feel connected, supported, and engaged. So a comprehensive onboarding process leads to higher employee satisfaction, clear expectations and integration into the company culture, which I think is huge, and a culture of learning and trust. So let's look into introduction. So introduction are those pre-onboarding steps. So pre-onboarding refers to the period between the moment when a candidate signs their employment contract and their first day on the job. An effective pre-onboarding process keeps new hires engaged and excited to start and set companies up for successful onboarding. Pre-onboarding will look different for every organization and company, and there's no one size fits all in any of these examples I'm going to show today. Processes that work for some organizations don't work for others. So you have to look and make sure that it fits your company, the amount of staff you have. But the whole idea with pre-onboarding is it's trying to achieve two objectives, which are keeping new hires engaged and providing them with essential information and to prepare them for their first day. So when we think of pre-onboarding, we think about, sending them their offer letter and employment contract. And how are we doing that? Is it just an email? Are they coming in? Are we sending through DocuSign or Adobe Sign or some sort of a HRIS or payroll system that has an HR module to automate that? So it's pre-onboarding is about how you discussed and negotiated benefits and wages. Did this conversation go well? Was it did you understand what they're wanting? Did you cut and dry? No, this is all we can afford. Pre-onboarding, a big part of pre-onboarding is also a welcome letter. And I'll provide an example here a little later. A welcome letter is really nice part of pre-onboarding. It really sets a tone and makes it seem very professional for an organization. It's not hard. You can create a template, but the whole idea is it clarifies what day one looks like who they're meeting, where they're going, what they need to bring, just to kind of get them set up and ready for the day. The whole point of pre-onboarding too is sometimes it's really nice to send documents ahead of time to reduce first day overwhelm. So a lot of times, lots of organizations say, here's our policies, some key policies, some things, you can pre-sign them, we'll do them on the date, but if you bring them pre-signed, that's great. Sometimes they send them automatically and say, can you have these signed so we can review them at the time? So people can spend those 2-3 weeks signing documentation, reading policies, and then they're ready to go. And you still review it in the orientation process. But other people say, no, I want to do it. I want a thorough onboarding process and do it on that day. I don't want to overwhelm people. It just depends on what works for your organization. Sometimes there also are virtual team introductions sometimes ahead of time once they've signed the contract, so people know, especially if they're working remotely or they've designed or set up meetings to work people remotely. Again, it just depends on the level of job and if it's on-site, hybrid, remote kind of thing. I want to go over an example of a welcome letter and kind of, the presentation doesn't allow me to go to it. Okay, well, I will bring it up then. Maybe will it? These are hyperlinked. Wow, got it. Okay. I wanted to give an example. I think it's really nice to just see a working example of what an offer letter says. This is pulled over from a Word document, so that the formatting, I apologize, some of these are formatting, they're a little bit off, but usually a welcome letter will have your company logo and name on it. And then it would always say something along the lines of, Dear Jane, welcome to our company. We're thrilled to have you join us as our new administrative assistant is what this position is. Your skills and enthusiasm will be a valuable addition to our team. We're looking forward to helping you start this exciting journey with us. So usually I write some sort of little line that's personable if they're really bubbly or if they have a lot of skills or something you picked up in the interview, I put in there just to personalize it. And then there's first day details, like you put their when they're starting, the time they're supposed to be meeting. You talk about what the actual location and provide that. If there's any special things like how to get in the building, buzzers, back door, front door, where to park and not to park, just so people don't get tickets, that's kind of really important information too. A lot of times I'll put in if they need to check in with reception, where they need to ask for, who do they ask for. Depending on the type of organization you're with, the dress code depends. So sometimes it's like they have to have their steel-toed shoes on when they come to the building, grab a vest, whatever it is. In this case, it's a professional attire. So we ask for obviously closed-toed shoes that's comfortable and safe. We ask them to pack a lunch. We talk about what the kitchen is and if there's any sometimes spots quick to grab or buy like a Subway or Taco Time or anything like that nearby. Just gives them an idea that like I could bring a lunch or I could leave at lunch, and what does my day look like if I need to run out do something. And then for the agenda for the day, I kind of talk about high level what their day looks like. So in this case, this person was having a welcome and introduction. They're going to meet the team, learn about their role. We're going to set up their workstation and get their email and some essential tools and platforms set up so they're accessing all the proper stuff that they need to do their job accordingly. Getting access and keys to the building, this person will need maybe door codes, things like that. Onboarding overview. So we have a checklist that we'll review basically fully onboarding and orientating them that we're going to go through. Introduction into some this person has client management and social media, but if there's any system trainings or special training they need to take for their job, this is listed. When their lunch break is, and then that we're going to go over team procedures. And then if there's any pre-employment that they need to have in, things like I need your criminal record check still, your proof of employment, or sorry, your proof of like licensing, maybe driver's license, sign that abstract form I sent you, anything that's kind of outstanding that you haven't got in maybe before you wrote this letter, I'd like to put it in there and say like it's part of the pre-employment, it's part of that contract, you have to have it ahead of time, thank you, and it's signed and dated. So this is just a really nice opportunity to just kind of have that nice segue. Once they sign their contract, it's like, oh, great, it came from somebody. I knew who I'm talking to. I knew who I'm meeting, and it sets them up for success. I also find the welcome letter allows you to kind of prioritize what their day looks like and set it up and organize. So you get your payroll person, your HR person, your health and safety party, maybe all ready to go and what that looks like. So that is introduction and pre-onboarding. I want to look more on what an actual onboarding can look like in an organization. And again, orientation is typically an introduction, and it's that transactional piece I spoke about. The new employee is typically induced to a team. They're walked around to the site, and they do their paperwork. But it's a lot more than that. It's making sure that what you need them to know for their organization and their role, they're kind of taught in that day or two or whatever you want that onboarding process to look like. I find most organizations have an onboarding process where they come in, they do their introductions and walkarounds, they get their paperwork done, they start reading some policies, they have lunch, and then they kind of finalize some stuff, and they kind of do that in day one. Day two is maybe some health and safety training or hands-on training in the morning, so they get a break. They're not just like reading, and then they do some health and safety training in the afternoon or any necessary training before they start their job, before they do any hands-on training. Again, no size fits all. Some people's is 1 day, some days half a day, some days 3 days. It just depends on how much information pre-training they need to be successful in their role. But I wanted to start off with just an example for you guys. So when you do have a new hire, it's really always important to have an employee file checklist. And so everybody should have this. It should be designed. If you don't have one, it's really great to start thinking about one. This is all the paperwork and everything that I need that in this employee's file to make sure it's on hand so that I know that I have everything for payroll, HR, for legal, for compliance, mandatory training, and everything to make sure they're filed. So typically you'll have, oh, this is an orientation checklist, sorry. Give me 2 seconds. being difficult today. So a new employee file checklist is basically everything that you need to do to make sure their personal and like internal working file is set up properly. So there are pre-employment steps typically. You usually always have some sort of like ledger at the top, what's the employee's name, position, what department, when they start, saying if they're full-time, casual, if they have employee number, if you have a system that you use, like it's FT001 is full-time or 002 is part-time, 003 is casual, whatever that employee number system looks like, who their supervisor is, and if there's a salary range or if they're hourly salary and what that looks like. And then typically it's, your checklist that you're using to make sure you're doing your job as a hiring manager or an HR professional, saying, okay, did I send out the offer letter? Did I get it back? Was it received? If you're sending out an onboarding packet, so an onboarding packet goes to them, and it's, what does that look like? Is it just a contract and we'll do everything else on day one? Or is it, am I sending them the contract and then the packet is a welcome letter? Does it have TD1 forms, direct deposit forms, benefit enrollment forms, a driver abstract? Does it have everything I want in there? And they sign it and bring it, and anything they miss, then I do it on day one. Lighten some of your administrative burden. Are you sending that by email? Are you sending it through Adobe? Are you sending it through DocuSign? So looking at what that onboarding packet looks like. And then there's things like making sure you send out the first day letter and whatever else is part of that onboarding packet. When we're looking at the employee file, there's things like, did I add it to my Google, my shared drive, my cloud system? Do I need to put anything in the paper file that I need? Am I saving anything electronic? Am I printing anything out? So you'll have a list of items that you need to put physically or electronically in an employee file, where whatever your system is. And then it's really good to list, based on the job description, you should know what they need for their role. So you should know if they need like email access, depending, like this is administrative assistant, so do they need access to like QuickBooks or any special software or programming that they need? Do they need door keys? And this is your fuel cards, credit cards, anything to do their job should be listed, so that as you go through and you set them up, what does that look like? And so you're emailing the right people, if it's IT, if you're setting it up yourself, and making sure you're going through those steps. I always like to have a scheduling buddy. I'll get into this a little bit detail, but a scheduling buddy is always nice to have that one person. It's great for them to be introduced when we do our orientation, but it's somebody to go to for support. And it's all those little things that you don't think about, like I forgot the code for the fax machine, or where do I send this, or I'm not quite sure who to send this email to, or it's just a person that they can go to have support. So a buddy system is always great, and letting them know ahead of time that they'll be that buddy, and setting up that system and process, like, hey, you're this person's buddy for the next 30 or 60 days or 90 days, whatever you choose, to make sure they're successful and go to questions. And it also helps them stop going to everybody interrupting work if they have that one go-to person to ask. It's always great when you're setting up to hire somebody, get their first meeting and their first week schedule all created, what that first day looks like first week, so that they can figure out and organize their life. People really appreciate that ahead of time, if it's possible. I always have pre-employment steps in as well. Anything that you need, driver's abstract, license, criminal record check, making sure all your onboarding packets done, making sure that all those are ready to go, and those T's are crossed and I's are dotted. A lot of times, there's risk if you hire somebody before you get a criminal record check or before you get your driver's license. So it's really important to make sure you have those and tell people like it's a condition of pre-employment, because that way, if they don't have it done, it's like, you can't start today. Like, we don't have the required pre-employment documents. Like, sorry. Benefits set up. So this is a great opportunity to make sure that if you want to send, like, you can send out electrics lots of times, like through like Manulife and Sun Life, you can send electronic emails and they can set up themselves. Or if you have to get paperwork ready or printed off, what that process looks like. For admin, any type of form submission, it's looking at, do we need to send anything to a bookkeeper or an accountant or insurance, anything for them. And then lastly, I like to end with like performance check-ins and orientations. So whoever is doing this training and is a hiring manager and their direct supervisor, they should they should schedule a 1-week check-in, usually 2-week check-in, and then 30, 60, and 90-day performance evaluations to make sure this person is successful. And I get into that a little bit detailed, but it's good to put this on the checklist to make sure it's in the file once it's done, because we all get busy, right? And when you start going, you're like, okay, we missed this. So with the new employee checklist, that's just your internal process. The orientation checklist is more about that first day. So once they're in, they're on site. This is a checklist that a lot of people say, like, what do I even do on their first day? And so typically I've designed it so it's, you do a tour, you give them to a buddy. Next, you do onboarding paperwork, any type of paperwork that you do once you've done a site tour. And lots of times you can do your site tour in the office, and it's a great way to introduce staff, get names. But also you can do your health and safety at the same time. Sometimes it's like, here's where the exit is, here's where the eye wash station is, here's where the first aid kit is, the AED machine, defibrillator. Sometimes you can double dip as well. Once you usually sit down and walked and got kind of integrated, then you can sit down and do the paperwork, and anything that you missed or need to do, like pension or benefits or anything like that, they can do. If you haven't sent it ahead of time, obviously, and you can make sure that, yes, it's on my orientation checklist, we went through it, they understand it. Make sure you're going through anything that in regards to workstation equipment software setup. So you walk them through, like, here's your access, this is how you access it, this is where you go. If you have a training laptop, great. They can do it right in front of you with you. They can do it later when they get set up and they start getting trained hand on hand with somebody. They just take it later. But it's making sure they have all the access that they need to do their job accordingly. A big part is having a discussion on daily routine. And this is kind of listing expectations. So when shift starts, what do lunch breaks and periods look like? Can you leave or not leave? The expectations of the organization. What does work attire and appropriate work attire look like? Restrooms and bathrooms, sometimes depending on site or off site, depending on the type of organization you are. Where do you park? First aid access if they need anything. Again, how to use door keys, where to do it, making sure they set up and understand it. If there's this is specific to the role, but there's invoicing procedures here. And so anything in the day-to-day routine that everybody does that you think is really important, that's unique to the organization, you can kind of put in there. Employee payroll and benefits is another kind of section here. So you can have your payroll person do this, or you can just make this a payroll kind of section, but you're going to make sure that you talk to them about, like, how am I paid? What are my deductions? Is it just CPP and EI, or is there social committee deductions? When are paydays, and what's pay schedule look like? And how do I get paid? Do I need to submit my time card? Talk about how overtime is calculated, and do they get overtime? Do you have an overtime agreement? You'd sign that at the starting, or you'd send that ahead of time. Lots of times it's really important to talk about errors in pay. People should, what do I do if I have an error in pay? Who do I go to? How do pay increases work? What does that policy look like? Is it just based on performance, or when the company can afford it, or is it annually when I hit, 2,080 hours? It's really important to talk about when benefits start, what all is in the benefit package, or just high level what's in the benefit package, and what vacation and holiday processes look like for taking time off and accumulating. If there's a process for requesting it or a system, you would show them. It's good to talk about performance reviews, how that works. If you guys do, annual, if there's quarterly check-ins, then an annual, whatever that process look like, and talk and let them know they're on probation. There's a process. They'll be, setting them up so they understand that we'll be meeting at 30, 60, 90 days, reviewing making sure we're reviewing that with you. Again, document requested is typically anything to do with pre-employment, like that driver's app. So that driver's license will be reviewed as well, just making sure if you didn't get it, that you're getting it on that first day, so don't forget. And then there's policies and procedures. You can do this in here. You can do this as a second document. I did provide a second document for policy signups, and it depends on the organization. Sometimes this whole orientation process, or this checklist I'm going through, people design a slideshow, and they go through all the high level, and they talk to it, and it's pretty with pictures, and they get really into the organization's mission and vision and culture and departments and who they are and the type of work they want to do and expectations. And they really kind of talk about that as they're going through their orientation. So some people have a checklist they follow, but they talk off a PowerPoint presentation. The orientation checklist also can be a video. Lots of people will actually do this once. They'll video it, and then they can have people sit down and be orientated. It's a little less personable, but it's a great way to be efficient. You can sit somebody down and they can be orientated, go through a bunch of stuff, and you can make sure that if there's any questions, you can answer them at the end. So again, there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to this. But it's what works best for your organization. So this didn't work again. I'm just going to pull up another example here. Give me just 2 seconds. And I'll show you what a nice way of doing a policy sign off is. A lot of times organizations, what they'll end up doing is they'll create a PDF. And if you're using a cloud-based system like SharePoint or Google or anything like that, a lot of times they'll have links right to the policy. And if the policy changes, you will have to update this form, obviously. But it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to go over what that looks like. And I'm hoping you guys can see this and it's not too small. Those clickable links just aren't working for some reason. So when we look at a policy sign off, sometimes it can be a second document. Something as simple as you just have your normal headers, employee name, position, department, hire date, full-time, part-time, their obviously employee number and supervisor. And then you can design this as how you want. So I have this one set up for somebody who, again, sorry, it's from a PDF, so it didn't pull over properly with the boxes, but they have general policies and information. Then they have HR related policies, and then they have health and safety related policies. So depending on what you think is applicable and you would like them to actually sign off and know, there could be IT policies, or depending on your organization. It's really great. They would go into this PDF, they click on it and read it, and this link would take them to their where it is in their Google Drive, and then they'd sign it. They check it off. Initial right here on the side, because there'd be a box here for in a PDF fillable, and then they would just sign at the bottom that they acknowledge that they read all of this and they date it, and then the supervisor would sign off on it that, yep, I've got this and we're good to go. So this is a great way to keep up to date on policies as they change, or making sure, because it's really important to make sure staff sign their policies ahead of time. I can't say that enough. I know lots of organizations say, here's your giant handbook. They get like, here's a giant employee policy manual. They're never going to get through that. You can give them a smaller handbook, like that's like 50 pages, and say, okay, this is up to you to read. But what happens if they don't read it? And then all of a sudden this person's like, well, I think this is on the so people go off with what everybody's saying and talking, and then they're not actually doing what they're supposed to. So if you can integrate them reading policies and signing off on it versus like, yeah, I gave them a policy book, you have a lot more meat and potatoes for when it comes to progressive discipline or performance management. It's like, you read that you can't smoke on site, you understand it, you acknowledged it, it becomes a problem, then you say you could, or depending on how egregious the contact is, like if it's fraud or theft, it's like you signed it, you're done, you're terminated. It's very hard when somebody does something and they haven't signed the policy. Yes, there are certain things that people, common sense, should know, and you can't put everything in your policy. There is implied understanding to contracts and policies. But it's really important to have them sign. You go back in it and it's like, did Jane get signed on this or read this? Yep, she did. And then it makes you feel a little bit better, and you have some sort of teeth to say, we had that conversation, you like in your onboarding process, or you watched it in the video, or you signed off in here, or you've had both or all three. You should really understand this, because there's in the video, is in this, you should understand that you can have that coaching or written or verbal or suspension or whatever that level of progressive discipline looks like. But it really allows you to make sure that you can hold people accountable to their role. You'd be surprised when people don't read policies, procedures. They don't understand the expectations in their role, and they just won't be as successful. Okay. I'm just going to go. So that orientation process, like I said, it's very transactional, but you can make it as personal as you want. So videos, you can pre-record. There's lots of different programs out there that you can do even for free and record videos and send shareable links, download them. You can create them on Canva. I think Vivo is one of them. Vimo is another one. You can also send everything through DocuSign or Adobe Sign, or if you have some sort of HRIS system or payroll system that has an HR module, you can set all this up to automate tasks and send it. But it's really important that if you don't have something set up, I strongly would suggest doing it. It takes, the more automated you can do, the more templates you've designed that you can just send out to somebody, it takes that less administrative burden on you or whoever's hiring. Lots of times I've seen organizations that part of the onboarding process is they go sit in HR, they have a little presentation or video, they do some of the basic onboarding and signing of tasks, and then they go through it to the payroll person, get to know them a little bit and get a payroll orientation. And that takes some time off the HR person not to be with them all day. And then they go to the health and safety person later on and talk to them. So you can design it the way you'd like it. But I will go over some things of making sure it's not some pitfalls that do come with orientation, such as information overload on the first day, which does happen, that we want to try to avoid. A big thing I think a lot of organizations miss, and it's a great opportunity, and I did touch on this a little bit, is that mission, vision, and values should be integrated into the orientation. It's not just all about policies. So it's not just that we are about clients and customer service or whatever the organization will be. It's really about why we do it, who we are, and what we do, and really getting those values across. And really making sure people understand that before they start, and you're setting them up so that this is the foundation I expect from you before they go get trained or get kind of complacent in a role or learn bad habits from other people. They're like, no, I'm supposed to be like this and follow this. So for integration, that's the third step in the onboarding process and part of that onboarding value chain. So for a candidate that was for somebody who's a candidate now is a new employee, they made the decision to jump on the ship. But the owners and managers really need to make sure, whoever's done the hiring, that we need to solidify that they stay on that ship and then they're not going to jump off. And we want them to stay on for the whole voyage. So the best practice is to get a person involved with sometimes in an internal process. Like, so if you're a larger organization, it's really great to have them set up with some sort of buddy. Again, I talked about that buddy system, so that they have somebody to go to for those questions that HR shouldn't be answering or the supervisor shouldn't be answering, that somebody on the same level can answer in their go-to. One thing about having a buddy system is making sure that person isn't getting fatigued and bogged down with so many questions that person can't get their job done. So we really want to make sure that they don't just become the trainer, but they're just like a buddy to ask, where's the supplies? How do I send this? What do I do? And it's one person, or sometimes it can be two, depending, that it's go to, so that this person isn't, one person isn't inundating all these other people and disrupting their workflow. Another good thing is getting somebody involved with some sort of work activity. So it's a social committee, organizing birthdays, recognizing things, groups, any special projects. Lots of times when employees associate fun with work, if another job comes knocking and it's like, well, I like my job and I'm part of the social committee and I help organize birthdays and John's retirement party and whatever it may be. It allows them to network outside typically their normal function or whatever department it is. And it gives them an opportunity to associate that work with fun, like I talked about. So if an opportunity arises and the person starts thinking about leaving, they have a little bit more connectivity. They're a little more sticky in the organization, and they're less likely to leave when they're integrated and they've met with different organizations and different department and different people. They are a little bit more stuck because they're more comfortable and they know a little bit more. Regular check-ins is a really big part of the onboarding process. We'll get into that in the next slide in more detail, but those check-ins, the 1, 2 weeks, 30, 60, 90 review is really important to make sure that people aren't left to the wolves and they have the support that they need. And again, it's all about clear expectations. You'd be surprised how so many people are like, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that, and wasn't told. So orientation is really about setting up those clear expectations, boundaries, conduct, on what you expect from your employees so that they can be successful and that you set them up for success so that they understand what's expected of them. So HR or the hiring manager, when it comes to checking in and doing that probationary period or check-in process, it can be done by HR, it can be done by the hiring manager. But the whole point is that you should never let this person just go. These check-ins are really, really important from a risk mitigation as well aspect. So the best practice for more frontline staff, and when I talk about frontline staff, I mean just like more of those lower end employees, not like supervisors, managers, or executive, those frontline staff doing those like daily tasks like admin or grocery store clerks, gas station clerks, those more like task orientated individuals. Best practice for them is to check in usually at week 1, second week, and then you can start doing 30, 60, and 85 days. I always say don't check up on 90 days because you already missed your mark and they're no longer on probation. So how often you check in is based on your process. You need to design it and that feedback system and how often you want to be check up on that person based on the role, how much skill level it requires, if it's senior management, supervisor, or your executive level. A big thing is don't do your performance evaluations at 90 days, or, stagnated from, 25 days or 30 or 35 days. It doesn't have to be exactly on the 30, 60, 90, but make sure you're staggering it so that you have that information and you can see progression, or it's not improving, or if there's a decline, you can see what's going on in their performance, have conversations, check in with them. And then if they are doing better, great. 60 days you're doing better, 90 you're even better, great. If they're slipping at day 60, you can talk about it. You have another 30 days to reevaluate, and you also have data to determine versus such an emotional decision. You have data saying like, no, you don't check in all these areas on these competencies based on the performance evaluation. You're not making the mark. And then it also helps you as a manager and HR make that decision that, you know what, you're not making the mark, you're not going to be a good fit. We're going to let you go on probation versus that person, 6 months down the line, you have all these issues, and then you're going to have to go through the whole progressive discipline process, typically, to properly mitigate your risk before you terminate them. You can obviously, like anybody, go without cause and pay as per employment standards, but there's also risk there, right? So I want to talk a little bit about the performance approach in this slide. So the probationary performance is part of the integration process from a risk perspective. So the first step is to be honest in performance evaluations and ensure they show the person is growing in their role. It's okay if they're not meeting expectations at the beginning or below as they're learning, but the point is seeing progression in the role over time, like I said previously. So it allows you to evaluate if they're improving honestly and if they are a team or organizational fit. If they do not work out, and if you have that rationale, like I said, to make the decision to terminate probation, or you can look at, maybe they're just towing the line and we can give them a chance depending on how you feel. But the whole point of the check-ins is to make sure that you're allowing some sort of feedback mechanism for the employee to also say, what am I not getting from my trainer? What didn't I not know? Or what do I not understand? And it's giving them an opportunity to provide feedback, and it's open and transparent so that they can tell you what they need and we can hopefully support them and help them. A big thing with performance evaluations is that if they're not done, a lot of times what ends up happening is you don't have any rationale to make that termination decision. So, for example, say somebody's sick, they're not fully trained in their probationary period, or you just need more time to review their probationary period. Sometimes also as a hiring manager or HR person, you have these spidey senses that you're not sure if this person's working out or if they're going to make it. So a tip I always tell everybody is in your employment contract and in your policies, you can state that you actually don't have a 90-day probationary period. You can actually make it a 6-month probationary period. It allows, or sometimes when you hire internally, you can call it a trial period or a reversion period. But this allows you to have a 6-month period if if somebody doesn't work out. So as a frontline staff, per se, you have a 90-day probationary period. It allows you, if your contract and your policies allow it, you can extend your probationary to 6 months. And you can say, I need more time, need to evaluate, you're not quite, we need to evaluate you more. And then they're extended out to that 6-month period. It's also great for managers or supervisors that you start them right away at a 6-month probationary period. And then they know that the clauses if they don't make it and what that looks like. Internally, it's great for people who move up in an organization. You're like, I'm not too sure if this person's going to make it as a manager or supervisor. A reversion clause in the contract or in your policies is great because that person can go in a role, and if they say, it is not for me, they revert back to their old role. And they have the choice, as well as the organization has a choice of saying who they want if they're successful in this position. So it's a great opportunity for both parties and both sides to say, it's not for me. So if you don't have an extension clause in your extension of probation in your probationary clause in your contract or in your policies, I would strongly look at putting one in. It's a great option for performance management, just to help sometimes get you when you're like, not too sure if you're a fit. You can move over to the probate, that you can move them to a 6-month with no worries. And all it is, the difference is you just have to pay them out their employment standards minimum. And you state that in the contract. And so it's a great kind of tip. If you're just like, I missed the mark, and then you don't want to go through all the way through progressive discipline, is get that put in your contracts. When it comes to, I'm going to go over a probationary review example. I hopefully have enough time here. I'm going to go over what kind of a probationary review will look like. But the review or check-in should be quite short. So if you're frontline staff, it should just be basically like, you go through your checklist and you verify, what key competencies are making, what key responsibilities they're progressing or not, some challenges, some things they're achieving on, and then you move on. It shouldn't be more than like a half an hour conversation, maybe 45 minutes. For supervisors and managers, it's going to be a little bit longer of a conversation, but it should be it's a personal conversation on where you're at, how you're doing, why you're not doing well. A lot of times, a tip for organizations when it comes to managers, sometimes when you can't supervise like as a hiring manager, HR, you can't monitor a supervisor or manager and you don't know how they're performing. A lot of times it's great to put it in 360 feedback evaluation. So what it is you get somebody from that department, their delegate that works with them. They provide feedback on what they think the manager is, if they're approachable, if they're providing support and whatever those competencies are you're looking for from your job description. And then that manager fills out their own evaluation. And then when that manager or the HR hiring manager gets it, they say, okay, I can see what this person's self-evaluation and these 2 employees are at their 30, 60, and 90. You do it 3 times, or over a 6-month period, you do it 6 times, once for each month. And you can see and evaluate if they're progressing, if staff getting there worse, if there's certain traits or personalities you're seeing that they're conflicting with staff members. But that's a great opportunity to see what's happening in that department that you're not privy to because you're not working in that department. I want to give an example of a performance review and what it kind of looks like. This one, I think, is based on kind of a frontline staff. This is a client care, more like an administrative assistant kind of role. So when you're looking at a 30, 60, 90-day performance evaluation and you're looking at designing one, again, you always have your legend of who they are, department role, etc. It's great to start with grading criteria. So in this instance, I designed one that's, if this person gets a 5, they're exceeding expectations, and it says what that means. So this is consistently exceeds job expectations, demonstrating high level skill initiative. If they're just meeting, it'd be meets all expectations with minimal supervision, performs well in all areas. And then obviously there's lower, like unsatisfactory, fails to meet job requirements, significant improvement needed. So when you're looking at creating a performance evaluation for the 30, 60, 90, you can take it from the job description and say, okay, what areas do I want to design my job description? So lots of times you'll break it into key responsibilities, section A, and then you'll do key competencies, which is section B. This one isn't designed like that. This one's designed a little bit different because it's more of a frontline role. I designed this where I took their key duties they're doing. So I said like knowledge on the job. This person has to have good customer service. this person is doing in this role, administrative and bookkeeping. They need to have adaptability and learning agility. Punctuality and attendance is another heading that we're looking at. Team collaboration and communication, time management and task prioritization, attention to detail. I have it here, it's company values and ethics and feedback. And under each one of these, they have more specifics. So for instance, administrative and record keeping, I have a question that's like, is the employee handling scheduling clients' records and payment processing efficiently? Because that's one of their tasks in their role. So I would rate them a 5, a 1, or 2, or whatever it is. And you go down this list and you would add it up. And you would verify what it adds up to. This one just shows the 30, the 60 and 90 aren't attached to it, but you would do that every time for 30, 60, and 90. You can have it all three, or you can just have one form and say this is 60, 30, or 90. It doesn't matter. I usually do it all three, or have a little chart at the side that says like, this is column for 30, this is column for 60, this is column for 90. I like it all on one sheet for simplicity of data, because when you add up the total, whatever it's out of, you can see that through the data that they've increased, that, they're at a 50 now because they're just kind of got the role, but now they're at 80. Oh, okay, now they went down to like 60. So I don't know if we're going to keep them, or they start at 40. They're still at 40. Do we want to maintain them? So it's a little bit looking at that data. So it's really important when you create these to have that some sort of data system or stat, like taking that data and taking that statistical data in to making sure that you can make a decision like, okay, they have improved in this area on customer service, or they have improved in this area. And the whole point is, lots of times in these performance evaluations, they'll have challenges or achievements that they need to work on in their 30, 60, 90 as well. And then you could give that to them. They work on that in their 36 or in the next month. So give it to them in 30 and 60 days they need to improve. And if they haven't improved, you redo their evaluation at the end of the month and you say, okay, we need to look at this and try again, or give them more support, or they're not a good fit. For frontline staff, we should be giving them that 90-day support is usually what it typically is. For managers or supervisors, it's more like a 6-month period. You need check-in support, regular support through that process. And in anything for executive level, it's actually 18 to 24 months. If people feel supported, they're going to be a lot more advanced, and they're going to have a lot more satisfaction in their role and a lot more connectivity to make that stay decision versus that exit decision. Best practices. So personalization is a big key. Make your onboarding process the way you want it. Tailor it the way that's designed for you. Automate as much as possible. Find those HR systems and processes. Something as simple as DocuSign or Adobe can do wonders for just automating and sending those packages together. It's about engagement and not just paperwork. So if you can put a presentation or a video together, break up some of the day. So on the first day, it's not so heavy and intensive. That'd be really great for the person, because they're not just taking it and just sitting and learning from you talking at them. You're looking at different ways. They're reading, they're walking around, they're watching a video, and it gets them a little bit more movement on the first day or two when they're being orientated. Get the manager involved. Managers have to really be involved. They have to buy into this process and making sure that they are on board with it as well. And put that feedback loop in. So that's the check-ins, that's the performance evaluations, to making sure that they get an opportunity to say if they need help or support, versus just relying on what the trainer says or the manager, because sometimes you don't know what's going on. Common pitfalls with onboarding. Common pitfalls typically are just that information overload. So spreading it over 1 day or 2 days is nice. It doesn't even have to be full 2 days. It's just, if you can do 1 full day of onboarding and do that health and safety PC on another day, or payroll another day, or just policies on another day, and break it up however you see fit, it really helps. And then the rest of that half day is then they start getting into the hands-on training. It really helps people just feel less like drink from a fire hose. And it also shows a little bit more, if you have your process designed, people are like, oh, they have their stuff together. They know what they're doing. I feel good about this company. I feel supported. You'll get a lot, the employees will be a lot more satisfied when you professionally show that you have designed and developed a process. The lack of structure is a big thing. People can tell if you're, off the whim or haven't done things and what's going on. It doesn't get a feel for things are managed properly, and they start questioning if the company is managed accordingly, if things aren't structured. And then no follow-up. If there's no follow-up, they're like, yeah, I just started my job, don't know where to go for this, and not sure if I'm doing well. I guess I'm doing well, and then all of a sudden they get fired or a bad performance review. So the check-ins really help to set those expectations. Evaluate when it comes to next steps for anybody in this process and anybody looking at onboarding. It's really important to evaluate what's your current onboarding process look like. Do I just send a contract? Do I just send an email? Do I send things through DocuSign? Do I have a system that I'm not fully integrating or utilizing? Who do I all want involved? How involved do I want them to be? What do I need? What do I want to get done before they start? And what do I want to do on their first day? It's really important to fully evaluate what you're looking for and how you can improve or streamline the process so it's less intensive sometimes or administrative heavy. Find those gaps, identify that support and structure you need, and what if it's from a tool or another person and support that they can help you through that onboarding process. To develop those onboarding checklists and a training roadmap. I didn't design a training roadmap, but all it is basically you take the job description, you look at what they need to do for their role to be successful, and you design what you're going to train them in the first week, 3 weeks, month, 60 days, 90 days, and you make sure they're properly trained on everything they kind of need to know. And whoever's doing the training signs off on it so that you can also say you were trained on this and you should understand this. Automate where possible to improve consistency and efficiency is really important. And then just those check-ins and milestones at that 1, 2 week, 30, 60, 90 day period for those frontline staff. And then obviously for more executive level staff, it's checking in larger intervals, it's 30, 60, 90, but then it's maybe quarterly after that. And just making sure staff feel supported. The main thing I want, and hopefully everybody got from this presentation, just reflect on how you can improve your onboarding process. And hopefully you got something from it in the sense that you can look at your onboarding process, seen some of the documentation I provided and showed that you can say, okay, I can look at doing this, or I haven't talked about this enough, or maybe I should look at doing this. I really want everybody to take something back from this presentation, and hopefully they've got something from it in regards to some practical questions or information. So I thank you guys. And are there any questions?
Any questions for Tina? Well, people are thinking about it or typing it in the chat. I've got one, and I may have missed this in the presentation, but as far as cost savings go to like an appropriate or well thought out onboarding versus one that isn't so structured, any idea on kind of what those cost savings would be?
I don't have
a company
direct stats, but they say when you have to rehire, I think you have to look at it as a rehiring standpoint. So that by the time somebody hires, does pre-screening reviews, spends the time and effort to get them all set up, doing the orientating, and this person leaves in under 6 months, you just spent typically it's 40 hours by the time you've done pre-screening, interviews, resumes, hiring, and orientation. I would like you to look at your cost of what your hiring manager or HR person makes a week. If it's $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, you just lost that time alone from that person and that other person's wages. So it's a lot based on that. They usually say when you lose a recruit, it's anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5% of their annual revenue when you have to rehire and retention rates. So a lot of it is turnover and time. So if people are not successfully onboarded, you're right back to the drawing board, and you're going through that cycle of I don't have time, I have to hire, but then they leave, and then you keep going through that cycle. But if they're onboarded properly and you've gone through the proper steps of recruitment and you found a successful candidate based on competencies, hopefully you found somebody who fits and they're going to stay for the long term.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure that would also be frustrating from like a culture perspective of like always having someone in and out
the
door, where if someone's responsible for training that person or help navigating that person through, that could also be a issue.
Yeah, a lot of organizations end up, I find that they have all these people in the same job description or same job title, and everybody has a different take on something, and it doesn't seem like a big deal until like you talk about overtime or you talk about breaks or cell phone use, and people are like, I didn't read the policy, I don't know. And then there's like, oh, there's an email sent out like 3 years ago on this, and people don't really know. So then the culture and the understanding isn't, but if everybody's orientated the same way, trained the same way, it kind of really helps solidify what you expect from an organization and from that employee.
Any other questions?
I know it's a little fast. I try to get all it in an hour.
A lot of good information. So thank you so much, Tina. I really appreciate your time. Please reach out to Tina if you have any questions, want some additional support. She's got her number there. And if you guys miss it, just send me an email and I can make sure I connect to you, or just check out Red Rock HR and you will find her there.
Well, I hope you guys got something from the presentation. And if you need anything, like Amber said, reach out.
Have a great day, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.